On tonight's edition of NewsCenter, millions of Koreans have already hit the road to spend the Lunar New Year holiday with family or spend the long weekend traveling. Our reporter is at the busiest train station in Seoul. The South Korean military believes North Korea may have begun injecting fuel into its rocket. Seoul is on full alert. And South Korea is working together with neighboring countries and the U.S. to come up with additional sanctions against North Korea. We'll have the details. It's Friday, February 5th, 2016. Good evening to our viewers in Korea. Hello to those around the world. This is NewsCenter. Now, millions of Koreans have already hit the road home for the Lunar New Year holiday, 5 days long this year, which essentially begins tonight. Traffic is quickly building up and expected to further intensify as those finishing off work and they have begun to leave the city for their respective hometowns. Not only the nation's highways, but train stations and airports are quickly becoming very crowded. Our very own Kim Hyun-bin is at a major railway station in the Korean capital. Now, Hyun-bin, it is that time of the year again. You're joining us live from the Seoul Station.
That's right, Konya. I'm here at the Seoul Station, and it's a little past 10 p.m. here, but the crowd trying to catch a ride doesn't seem to dwindle. Now, more than 36 million people are expected to travel by plane, train, and automobile. Now, I got to talk to a few of them. Let's take a listen.
We are going down to Busan to see our grandparents. I will be able to rest and watch as much TV as I want, so I'm very excited.
We came from Busan. We are here to see our parents who are living in Seoul. It has been a long time since we last saw them, and we hope they are healthy.
Heavy traffic began about 3-4 hours ago, and as you can see, there is still a bumper-to-bumper congestion. Now, officials expect the congestion to continue through midnight, peaking on Sunday morning, a day before the Lunar New Year. An estimated 5.3 million people will be heading to their hometowns on that day alone. Now, from Seoul, it's expected to take about 2 hours and 40 minutes to Daejeon, 4 hours 30 minutes to Daegu, and 5 hours 20 minutes to Busan on average from Friday to Sunday. Now, returning traffic is expected to peak on Monday afternoon. While some 2.8 million people are expected to board trains, the Korea Railway Corporation has deployed about 150 additional KTX bullet trains and 150 regular trains to reduce overcrowding from Monday to Wednesday.
Now, Hyun-bin, a massive exodus like this one is bound to, raise the chances of accidents. I suppose more precaution is advised for those, of course, taking their own vehicles and those where you are, Hyun-bin, taking the train. Do you have any pointers for drivers especially?
I sure do. With the long driving hours ahead, drivers should keep their vehicles well ventilated. And coffee and tea always helps, as well as chewing gum. But if that doesn't do the trick, make sure to stop by a nearby rest area and get some stretch in, or maybe a quick nap before you go on the move again. Back to you.
Right. We'll keep that in mind. Hope those of you behind the wheels now or will be driving long hours remember those tips from Hyun-bin. Well, things are looking very busy there, Hyun-bin. Thanks so much for that report, and an early Happy New Year to you.
Early Happy New Year's to you too, Kanyang.
Now, ahead of the Lunar New Year holiday, President Park Geun-hye visited a local traditional market. There, she pledged vendors with further policy supports and encouraged the public to make more frequent visits to the nation's traditional markets, now all revamped. Arirang News Song Ji-sun reports.
As millions of Koreans begin their journey to meet their families for the Seollal or Lunar New Year holiday, President Park stopped by a traditional market in Incheon, west of the capital. The president's visit to the Cheongseojin Jungang Traditional Market this time is even more special, as this was the same market she visited 4 years ago when she was leading the ruling Saenuri Party. The market is also among the traditional venues that have been revamped with modern technologies, both in facilities and marketing, thanks to the government's efforts to merge cultural content to enhance consumer shopping experience. Now powered by solar panels, The market offers cultural classes to local residents. In addition, the government provides various benefits for traditional markets, like voucher programs and tax deduction advantage for consumers. It is also cheaper to shop at these traditional markets for ingredients needed to set the table for ancestral memorial ceremonies, a staple tradition on Seollal, costing an average of $150 this year, or 20% less than buying at large supermarkets. Pledging continuous support in policies that can help revitalize traditional markets, President Park stressed the importance that cultural content has to attract more consumers and help turn traditional markets into leading examples of creative economy. 송지선, Arirang News.
Moving on, how ready is North Korea in launching a rocket? South Korea believes chances are that Pyongyang has begun its launch preparations, which includes assembly of rocket parts and injection of fuel. For more on what may be an imminent long-range missile launch by the North, here is our defense correspondent, Connie Kim.
South Korea says there is a possibility that North Korea is injecting fuel in its long-range rocket to forge ahead with its launch within its notified launch period. Considering it takes a day or two to complete such fuel injection, a South Korean defense official said there are chances Pyongyang may be completing all related preparations to fire its missile at any time between February 8th to February 25th. That was a timeline notified by the communist state to UN agencies. Moreover, speculations that the long-range rocket assembly has been completed and it'll soon be erected at the launch pad are gaining weight. Seoul, on its side, is preparing for any unusual and unexpected situation. In an emergency meeting with senior defense officials, South Korean Defense Minister Han Min-gu ordered the military to respond actively to North Korea's long-range ballistic missile launch. The South Korean defense chief also commanded military troops to be on standby in case of any unusual activity.
North Korea could launch a long-range ballistic missile at any time besides the notified period. Thus, you must do your best to detect and identify any unusual movement by Pyongyang.
Seoul has also carried out live fire tests for its Chunmu, a multiple launch rocket system that can fire both 130mm caliber and 230mm caliber rockets. If North Korea has indeed started injecting fuel in its long-range rocket, experts predict Pyongyang will likely conduct its long-range ballistic missile launch within a week's time, disregarding calls from the international community to halt any further provocations. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, a flurry of diplomacy in and around the Korean peninsula. Seoul's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se met with 4 foreign envoys in Seoul today to discuss appropriate measures against Pyongyang for the recent provocations. Our foreign affairs correspondent Kwon So-ah reports the focal point there, tougher sanctions.
North Korea's so-called Pyeongjin line, its ambitions of developing nuclear weapons and its economy simultaneously, will never succeed. That's the consensus of Seoul's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se and ambassadors to South Korea from the US, Japan, Australia, and the EU as they gathered at Seoul's Foreign Ministry Friday to discuss ways to deal with North Korea's nuclear test last month, as well as its most recent announcement of a satellite launch widely believed to be ruse for a missile test. They vowed the strongest sanctions to date.
In regards to additional sanctions from each country, Minister Yoon and the ambassadors assessed all related fields, including weapons of mass destruction, and decided on multi-dimensional and multi-level sanction measures.
The most powerful measure is known to be the one discussed at the UN Security Council, still waiting to be adopted.
After Pyongyang's third nuclear test, China was very cooperative and quick to vote in favor of a new resolution. But it's taking longer this time as Beijing and Washington are struggling to see eye to eye.
This as the U.S. is seeking much stronger sanctions than China is willing to approve. According to an official at Seoul's Foreign Ministry, there are currently a number of possible scenarios regarding the content of the new resolution, all dependent upon if and when North Korea launches a rocket. The official says if Pyongyang does conduct a missile test, a supplementary revision of the UN's resolution against the North's nuke test would be a more likely option than drafting a totally new one, which seems to indicate significant progress towards the adoption of new sanctions. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
South Korean lawmakers vowed to keep close tabs on North Korea for any signs of a secretive rocket launch. Our senior parliamentary correspondent Kim Young-gil shares with us this rare occasion when rival parties automatically see eye to eye, a unified condemnation of the regime.
The ruling Saeul Party on Friday said South Korea's military should be on alert and coordinate with the international community to prevent the North from making a terrible mistake.
The government should thoroughly monitor North Korea for its possible launch of long-range missiles and maintain military readiness. We also call for close cooperation with the international community and diplomatic efforts to thwart any provocations from the North.
The ruling party also called for stern military readiness with enhanced capacity to respond preemptively to the North missiles and urged the adoption of strong sanctions with the cooperation of the international community. The main opposition Minju Party also condemned the communist regime, saying the party will not tolerate such actions.
North Korea's notification of an imminent missile launch has sparked insecurity on the Korean peninsula. The North should stop violating UN Security Council resolutions and jeopardizing South Korea's national security.
The Minju Party added that if Pyongyang goes ahead with its ballistic missile test, it will be another obstacle to Korean unification. The minor opposition People's Party also urged Pyongyang to refrain from its plans, saying that it would only exacerbate international tensions. South Korean politicians vowed to make an all-out effort to convince Pyongyang to abort its plans for a missile test and urged the government to take steps to ensure the safety of the people. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
And this just coming in from the nation's presidential office, President Park Geun-hye had a phone conversation with Chinese President Xi Jinping about an hour ago, where the two leaders discussed North Korea's fourth nuclear test, as well as an anticipated rocket launch by North Korea. We'll have more details in our next newscast. Now, despite the sluggish recovery momentum, Korea did manage to return to a budget surplus in 2015 after 3 straight years of being in the red. Tax revenue, for one, was boosted thanks to government stimulus measures and a hike in cigarette taxes. Hwang Ji-hye reports.
Korea's budget balance last year ended in the black, marking the first surplus in 4 years. The finance ministry says the country collected roughly $300 billion in revenue, putting the gap with expenditure at around $2.5 billion. The surplus came as the government managed to push up its tax revenue last year by about $2 billion compared to the amount designated in the budget. This is in stark contrast with a roughly $10 billion deficit posted a year earlier. The upswing in tax receipts was led by improved domestic consumption and a busy real estate market, thanks to government stimulus measures, while a tax law revision that nearly doubled cigarette prices also played a big part. The government laid out an aggressive set of stimulus measures last year that included boosting home transactions and introducing major sales events. Customs duties, however, slumped by around $180 million compared to the previous year after seeing sluggish imports due to plunging oil prices. Income tax revenue from interest rates also dropped, as the country's key rate is at a record low of 1.5%. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
While Brazil, already in the midst of Zika outbreak, faces the grave challenge of preventing further spread of the virus during its carnival holiday that begins Friday, and further down in Summer Olympics in August, the first Zika infection has been reported in Spain. The pregnant woman had recently returned from a trip to Colombia. Meanwhile, the Korean government has advised those who have traveled overseas within the past month not to donate blood. For details, here's Kim Mo-kyun.
It's thought to be the first such case in Europe. The woman is said to be in her second trimester of pregnancy and was under medical supervision. She's described as being in good health, but details on the condition of her unborn child have not been released. The woman is now among the 7 people identified as having Zika in Spain. Spain's health ministry has moved to reassure the public, saying all the cases were contracted overseas. International efforts to cope with Zika are ongoing in various fields, especially in the tourism sector. Italy's largest airline, Alitalia, says it's offering a no-penalty fee for pregnant women and their fellow travelers who wish to change flight schedules or cancel their trips to countries affected by Zika. Destinations where the Zika virus has been found include Brazil and other Caribbean and Latin American countries. Korea's land ministry has also announced that pregnant passengers will temporarily be exempt from flight cancellation fees if they have tickets to Zika-affected countries. Korean Air, Asiana Airlines, and the nation's low-cost carriers will not receive any cancellation fees for flights scheduled from February 1st to April 30th. Jin Air and T-Way Air have further expanded the scope of the exemption to routes to Bangkok and Phuket, Malaysia's Kota Kinabalu, and Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
The Zika virus spreading in scope and geography. Let's get some experts' view. We have one of Korea's leading experts in the field, Yoon Gyu, joins us via Skype. He is the director of Dengue Vaccine Initiative at the International Vaccine Institute. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Yoon.
It's my pleasure.
Now, Zika virus has been making global headlines for days now. From an expert's point of view, how serious is this global outbreak of Zika?
Well, I think it's potentially very serious. There's 2 factors. One is how widespread it is, and it seems like it has caused an awful lot of infections and is quite geographically widespread. And then the second is the concern about the potential birth defect connection. And so because of that, the potential extreme consequences when that does happen, it's causing quite a lot of alarm.
Now, narrowing our scope to Korea, for those of us here in this country, how worried should we be of contracting this virus, especially with the weather warming up from here on?
Well, I think that the concern about contracting it within Korea itself is not really warranted. The real impact that it would have for Koreans is for Korean travelers to areas that are endemic or potentially endemic for Zika virus infection. So it's the travelers really that where there's a concern. Pregnant travelers or women who are trying to get pregnant, those would be the folks that really would be should have the most concern.
So what you're saying is that it will have an impact on not only those who are pregnant, but those who are trying to get pregnant as well. Is that what you're saying?
Well, the risk for birth defects, of course, occurs when there's a Zika virus infection during pregnancy. The concern about women who might be trying to get pregnant is that, you don't know exactly, oftentimes, when you become pregnant. So if you're in the process of trying to become pregnant or having a baby, then the timing is not always definitive, and that's why I say that.
Right, fair enough. So you've been studying the dengue fever virus for a very long time, I know, which is also a mosquito-borne virus like Zika. Is there a connection between the dengue and Zika?
So they are similar. The viruses, dengue virus and Zika virus, are in similar groups. And in fact, if you look at the genetic sequences, they're about 70% similar. And the other similarity is that they share the same mosquito vector, so they, in some ways, are transmitted in a similar pattern.
Now, you say they are very similar. So since Zika virus and dengue are so similar, and there is a vaccine for dengue, does this mean a vaccine for the Zika virus can be developed soon?
Well, that's always not totally predictable, and the development process for a vaccine typically takes quite a few years. I think that the people that have been in the process of developing dengue vaccines can use that experience to accelerate the pace of Zika virus vaccine development. But it is a new virus. It's not the same virus. So the Zika virus development process still has to start essentially from the beginning. But again, lessons learned can be used to help with the Zika virus development process.
All right, Dr. Yoon, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us tonight. We appreciate it.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you.
PyeongChang.
Summer 2011 has a special place in the hearts of many Koreans. The entire country watched in anticipation with high hopes of winning the third Olympic bid. Then there it was, Jack Rogue flipping the card in his hand that read PyeongChang, the host city of the 2018 Winter Olympics. That was 2011. 4.5 years later, here we are in February 2016. And now, the PyeongChang 2018 organizers have announced that their first test events are set to take place. The PyeongChang Committee for the 2018 Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games held a press conference this week marking 2 years from the Winter Games.
Our first World Cup this week marks the official start of our journey to the 2018 Games. We have moved from the planning phase of the Games to the operational phase, and with 2 years left, finalizing many details. We are working very closely with the IOC, IPC, and the IFs to make sure everything is ready.
The 2016 FIS Ski World Cup kicks off tomorrow with roughly 58 world-class athletes from 16 nations. It'll be the first international competition to be held at the newly opened PyeongChang venue, the Cheongsan Slope, a major test for PyeongChang as concerns had been raised about the readiness there. The 2018 Winter Olympics will take place in 2 clusters spread throughout PyeongChang, nearby Bogwang and Cheongsan. The PyeongChang Mountain Cluster, where the Olympic Stadium is located, will feature skiing and sliding events. All 7 venues in PyeongChang and Cheongsan will be within a half-an-hour drive from the Olympic Village. Bogwang will host the snowboard and freestyle ski events, while Cheongsan will host the alpine ski competitions. The coastal cluster will be home to the ice events such as ice hockey, curling, and skating. All 5 venues at the coastal cluster will be within 10 minutes from the Olympic Village. All events will take place within half-an-hour drive from the main center in PyeongChang, making it one of the most compact venues in Winter Olympics history. Hundreds of thousands of athletes, officials, and visitors will be in Korea during the Winter Olympics. But remember, PyeongChang is a small alpine town of 300,000 people. How will they accommodate all these visitors?
I'm sure there are concerns about accommodation as PyeongChang is not a big city. But we have already secured 20,000 rooms of 3-star quality and above. We also have a contingency plan, the high-speed train.
High-speed train. If the high-speed train is completed on schedule in 2017, visitors will be able to reach PyeongChang from the Incheon International Airport in less than 70 minutes. Travel time from the nation's capital to PyeongChang will be in less than an hour, which means you have the option of staying in Seoul. When it comes to the future of the Winter Games, global warming has us skating on thin ice. PyeongChang is no exception. Does it have a contingency plan?
I agree that the warm weather conditions may hamper us in 2 years. Therefore, we will make sure our snowmaking capacity will be at not 100%, but 120%. We are also studying the snow storage systems which were used at the Sochi and Vancouver Olympics.
Another key factor to a successful Olympic Games, drumming up support amongst the public, both domestically and overseas. How do we do that? I asked what the PyeongChang organizers had in mind. So you said, the president said that you're moving away from the planning phase and now on to the operational phase. I'd like to know what kind of international promotional events or efforts are in the works or you have planned for the rest of this year and next year?
It is critical to boost public awareness of the PyeongChang Olympics. We have begun promotion activities both at home and abroad. We recently opened the PyeongChang House in Gangneung, and we'll also be putting up installments in public places such as airports and train stations. For overseas, we're working with Korea Tourism Organization and the Korean Culture and Information Services.
This will not be possible without the cooperation of the media, both domestic and international. For overseas promotion, I would like to particularly ask Arirang TV to do your part. That will be key to the success of the Games.
Will do, will do. This is Arirang News' first installment of a series of 2018 PyeongChang Winter Olympics coverages throughout this month for the test events and all the way leading up to 2018 Winter Games. Until then, let's keep the passion connected. The two candidates for the Democratic presidential nomination in the U.S. are on the attack after finishing in a virtual tie in the much-watched Iowa caucuses. Bruce Harrison is live in the studio with me. Now, Bruce, the candidates sparred Thursday on an MSNBC-hosted debate. This was, I would say, the most it was the most contentious debate yet. So why did things get so heated up?
Yeah, it was really intense, Kanyang. Good evening. Well, like you said, in Iowa, they finished in a virtual tie, which was unexpected by a lot of people, especially the Clinton campaign. She didn't expect it to be so close. So now it's only natural as the campaign progresses for them to pick each other apart on a lot of different issues, whether it's health care or foreign policy knowledge.
Well, what were some of the moments that got the most animated?
I went through a lot of the clips, and I think the talk about campaign contributions was probably the most intense. The candidates have spent a lot of time discussing how they're going to rein in Wall Street, so Sanders couldn't help but poke Clinton over her super PACs that have taken contributions from Wall Street firms. He accused Clinton of representing the establishment and also noted she's received speaking fees from Goldman Sachs.
And one of the things we should do is not only talk the talk, but walk the walk. I am very proud to be the only candidate up here who does not have a super PAC, who is not raising huge sums of money from Wall Street or special interests.
Clinton immediately jumped into the fray, defending her record as a politician.
If you've got something to say it directly. But you will not find that I ever changed a view or a vote because of any donation that I ever received. And I have stood up and I have represented my constituents to the best of my ability, and I'm very proud of that.
You know, what we have here, I helped write.
The MSNBC debates the last time the candidates meet ahead of Tuesday's primary. According to Real Clear Politics, Sanders led Clinton by 16 points Friday in a nationwide average of polls. Clinton's polling much higher than Sanders in South Carolina, where voters will head to the polls after New Hampshire later this month. Britain says it will still arrest WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange despite a ruling by a United Nations panel. The panel found Assange should be allowed to go free from the Ecuadorian embassy in London and awarded compensation for what amounts to a 3.5-year detention. Ahead of the ruling, Assange said if the panel ruled in his favor, it would be long-awaited vindication.
I have been held without charges in this country for 5.5 years. That is not an acceptable situation in Europe, and I'm confident in my arguments, and the UN will find in my favor.
A British government spokesman said the panel's decision changes nothing, and Assange is voluntarily avoiding arrest by staying in the embassy.
Bruce, so the UN panel has concluded that this is a deprivation of liberty, and of course the UK government has said that called it ridiculous, actually. Now, on what grounds can the United Kingdom continue to pursue Assange's arrest?
Sure. Well, this panel's decision is not legally binding in the international realm, and the UK is still bound to arrest and extradite Assange to Sweden, as they had previously done. He went to the embassy when he was out on bail, and that's where he sought refuge since then. So based on UK and Swedish law, they have rights to continue to pursue the arrest.
Well, a very interesting story in development. Julian Assange, definitely a very interesting character with a very interesting story behind him.
Sure. Yeah, the major leaks out of Washington. So.
Right. It's definitely something that we will keep a close eye on. Thank you, Bruce, for that, and I will see you next week.
Have a nice weekend, Ganyang.
Now, the long-awaited 5-day-long Seollal holiday starts tomorrow, but as we mentioned at the top of the broadcast, roads are already crowded at this hour with vehicles heading out of Seoul. But it seems like drivers are facing colder than average weather conditions on top of the long hours of driving. So for more, let's go over to our Lee Ji-hyun. Ji-hyun, what's going on?
Well, Ganyang, temperatures have dropped today, and on top of that, it is drier than usual too.
Right. I'm hearing that weather alerts have been reissued for some parts of this country as well.
That's right. A cold wave advisory has been reissued in many parts of the upper regions, and the dry weather advisory is still in effect here in the capital. So it's going to be another dry day tomorrow. And it looks like below average temperature should continue until the end of the weekend. Seoul will have another cold morning low tomorrow, as daily low will kick off at -7 degrees Celsius, -4 for Daegu, and Busan and Jeju Island will wake up to a low of -2 and 2. And as for the daily highs, it's going to be slightly cooler than today, peaking to 1 here in Seoul, 4 for Daegu, and Busan will rise to 6 degrees Celsius tomorrow afternoon. And it will remain cold and dry but sunny through the weekend. Then a mix of rain and snow is in the forecast on Monday, while the rest of the holiday should remain mild, even peaking to near 10 degrees Celsius here in Seoul by the middle of the week. Now that's Korea for you, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
And that is our broadcast on this Friday night. I'm Moon Ganyang. Thank you everyone for watching. For those of you here in Korea, I hope you have a wonderful holiday with your loved ones. An early Happy New Year to you, and I'll see you next year based on the lunar calendar on NEWSCENTER.